I fear we are witnessing the end of American democracy. That's the headline of a recent New York Times article. Wall Street Journal says our polarized politics is stressing the constitutional system. New York Magazine says the RNC has made a compelling case for America's imminent collapse. As we record this, America is entering into a second wave of civil unrest following the news of Jacob Blake, a 29-year-old black man in Kenosha, Wisconsin, who was shot 7 times by a police officer in the back in front of his children. Shortly thereafter, a 17-year-old vigilante was arrested after a shooting left 2 dead and 1 injured during the unrest. Now the Justice Department has deployed federal agents to be sent in, including the FBI, ATF, and U.S. Marshals. Are we on the brink of civil war? We're just coming out of convention season where both parties made it clear that they are the good guys and the other side is the bad guys. Oh, and that the fate of our nation hangs in the balance if the bad guys win the next election. So let me ask all of you marketing and media folks, did you bake the collapse of American democracy into your 2021 forecast? Radical polarization, the success of your business, and your duty as a business or brand to look out for the interests of your community and your stakeholders are much more closely linked than what is being advertised. Welcome to Oxford Road Presents The Divided States of Media. I'm Dan Granger. This is a program where we're taking a journey through the increasingly complex landscape where brands are tasked with the competing responsibilities of making allies of the masses while being expected to take a public stand on controversial issues in a country that seems to be bitterly divided along party lines. We're walking this tightrope together to find a way to do well in our work while also doing some good in society without deepening the divides that could lead to the unraveling of our nation. Today's guest is no stranger to these topics. We welcome to the show Jordan Harbinger. Jordan is a Wall Street lawyer turned podcast interviewer. His approachable style and knack for securing high-profile guests like the late Koby Bryant, Ray Dalio, Chelsea Handler, Mark Cuban, and many, many others have led some to call him the Larry King of podcasting. His show, The Jordan Harbinger Show, is heard in 190 countries and was voted Apple's best of 2018 among podcasts. My favorite thing about Jordan, he's also a Michigan guy. So welcome, Jordan. It's good to have you.
Thanks for having me on. And as you read that, I realize it's totally pointless to list how many countries your podcast that's on the internet is available in. So I'm probably going to go ahead and nix that from the website, wherever that might lie.
In the spirit of frank discussion, I was thinking that exact thing as I was reading it. So yeah. I completely agree.
Just going to go ahead and make a quick note right now.
And any other places you see us messing up in our intro, by all means. But listen, Jordan, tell us about, first and foremost, let's just set the stage a little bit here. Tell us about the Jordan Harbinger Show and how it came to be and what you're doing with that platform.
So I initially was teaching a class on networking and relationship development for lawyers, which sounds really exciting, I'm sure. And that was done as I was at the University of Michigan Law School. And surprisingly, no one cared about that class. And I wasn't a professor or anything. I was a student. And I realized through my summer internship, which is like a junior level associate position at a law firm, that none of us knew how to network. And yet all the partners were like, networking is how you get to the top. It's how you develop business and all these things. So I decided to ask how this was done, and nobody had any advice. So I spent the next few years learning networking and relationship development, taught a little bit of an intro class on it. And as I mentioned, nobody was that interested. So I started teaching the class at a bar because there was only 4 or 5 people that would show up. And as we started doing this at the bar, I started to deconstruct nonverbal communication mostly. So like body language of people that were there together. And that became Jordan deconstructs people that are on dates, basically, good dates and bad dates. That started to really catch fire, I would say, because it contained a lot of actionable takeaways. And I used to have huge amounts of mostly female law students coming to these semi-weekly courses at this bar. And that attracted, of course, all the male law students that were wondering what was going on. And that quickly became me teaching the same thing over and over and over again with a rotating cast of classmates. So I decided to burn those lectures, which were not lectures, but just discussions, to CD and carried them around with me. And when somebody new would show up, I would hand them a CD. They would have to go listen to it and come back. And what I found was that people were taking the CDs and giving them away and keeping them, and they would want one for their brother. So I started charging. And then people would say, oh, you're charging $20? Great, I want 8 of these. So quickly realizing I was not going to get rich burning CDs, I wanted to look for a place to put an MP3 file on the internet. There was none. This is 2006. So soon we met a friend for drinks, and his friend who was with him worked at Apple, and he said, we have this new thing called podcasting. You should put your MP3 files in iTunes, and here, I'll show you how to do that. So we did it, and that was how the beginning of the Jordan Harbinger show was born. We didn't think it was a podcast that was going to be a show. We thought this is an easy way to distribute a sound file. And of course, within the first couple of weeks, we were getting downloads from Canada and South Africa instead of just Ann Arbor, Michigan. And that was what really showed me the power of the medium. It was like, wait a minute, people can find this anywhere. Anybody with iTunes can get it, not just law students in my class who show up late. And that was when I knew. I just kind of, the 2020 hindsight, I probably could have just quit my law career right then, because it was all I thought about, all I did, and all I wanted to work on from there. And as I left for New York to work on Wall Street, I had guest spots on radio. I ended up taking the show that was the podcast at the time to Sirius XM. I ended up with a radio show on Sirius XM. It was the first podcast that later became a radio show. It was the first time anybody had done that. Kept doing the podcast, and 13.5 whatever years later, here we are with the Jordan Harbinger show in its current incarnation.
Love it. And at what point were you able to make it a full-time gig that could sustain the bills?
Yeah, good question. So this is kind of an unfair answer, but it happened within the first year, because what initially had happened was I went to Wall Street. I was working, I was doing the show, and I was doing the radio show, Moonlighting, and I was selling phone coaching, essentially. So like people could call and ask for the customized advice of the type I was giving on the podcast, and that started making a lot of money. And then people would say, can I give you $5,000 if I just like sleep on your couch for a week and you show me everything that you're talking about, and I can like go around with you and, you know, be your friend for a couple of weeks? And I thought, great. So then I started having like crowds of guys doing this. And then I hired other instructors and teachers and salespeople. And so it turned into a business pretty much right away. Now, granted, it was probably like a $24,000 a year type salary in Manhattan type of business. So it wasn't really going to do the work. But within the first year it was a business, the economy tanked, and I ended up leaving law and turning that into a multi-7-figure company, probably over the next 24 months.
Yeah. So the obvious question is, how much does it cost to sleep on your couch for a week now?
Now? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a good question. Now, I do have a really comfortable sofa. Yeah. So I would say market rates, I'm gonna go with $1,000 a day. But if we're talking Airbnb, and, you know, there's going to be a cleaning fee involved. So I'd really have to think about it. I got to price the market.
This is actually a good business opportunity. Airbnb for experts, where you rent the house, but they don't leave.
You know, it's not a bad idea. It's usually called consulting, but this is so much more in-depth and invasive, actually, I think is the right word that we're looking for.
It's Cameo meets Airbnb. It's perfect.
Cameo meets Airbnb meets like Big Brother.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. Back on topic. So tell us what it's been like since the world changed in March doing the show. How has that affected you and your ecosystem?
So everyone had a 10 to 15% dip. Spotify was a major dip because that's more streams. So that was affected instantly versus the people who download, who still download, and we don't even know if they listen. That's how podcasting works in 2020. Mm-hmm. But since I already had a 1-year-old baby, or an almost 1-year-old baby, and thank you. I'm building a house next to where I live now. So I live with my brother-in-law. So when this all happened, I was like, oh, I'm going to be more cooped up. What does that even mean with a 1-year-old baby in a house under construction? Is there a such thing as more cooped up? And then all these fires started in Northern California where I live. So now I can't even go outside. So I guess there is a such thing as more cooped up. But so it was a good excuse to get a lot more work done and get a lot of projects done that are kind of those someday maybe projects, because other things are on hold, right? There's a bottleneck if you have to film something. It's just not going to happen. So I started to knock those things off the list. The other thing that I was able to do is get a lot more talent that normally is not available. You know, if you ask Pitbull to be on your podcast, you're never even going to get through the first layer of gatekeeping. And now Pitbull is pitching our podcast because he can't do any shows. So he's starting a show, right? So you have a lot more access to people that you normally would never be able to get on a podcast. And it's funny because 2020, we're saying this, and I think in 2025 or 2030, people are going to go, who doesn't do podcasts? That's the place for everyone to go do stuff. In 2020, believe it or not everybody looks at podcasting the same way that they eventually will, which is like the main piece of media that you can do that's actually relevant and gets consumed.
So talk a little bit about the evolution of the show and the type of content that you do, because it feels like it's evolved from this extension of your consultations to more of like a parsing of habits of successful people and things like that. So can you talk a little bit about what you cover?
Sure. So on the Jordan Harbinger show, essentially what I'm trying to do is, instead of me giving advice all the time, which I still do on Fridays, which people write in and I give advice on Fridays, I decided, look, I've got a great way and great access to people that most of us don't have access to. Ray Dalio, Mark Cuban, Chelsea Handler, Howie Mandel, Pitbull coming soon, right? So these are people that you can't just ask for advice whenever you want. You can't just tweet at them. They're not going to answer you. They're overwhelmed. I get to sit down with them for an hour and really deconstruct what they do, how they do it, some of the habits that make them successful, and some of their stories that just don't get told elsewhere, because most interviews are 5-15 minutes on some radio station somewhere, and they can't go in depth about their battles with mental illness. They can't go in depth about all the uncertainty they've faced in their career. They can't go in depth about how China is affecting the global economy or whatever subject at hand. So I love to do these long form discussions that are conversational and that have a practical takeaway for the person who is listening to the show. Because a lot of podcasts and a lot of radio and a lot of media, it's just interesting or it's just entertaining. And I know that the highest performing people usually don't just want to be entertained. They want to leave and go, that was a good use of my time, because now I have a tool that I can use, or a mindset that I can use, or a takeaway that I can use. Entertainment is just not enough for a lot of overachievers. So I'm sort of speaking to that market without turning into, here's a bunch of homework that makes you feel bad about yourself, and now that you have to go and do. So it's like edutainment, as much as that word makes me want to puke.
Right. So as you're talking to all these successful people, are you seeing a change in their tone or a common denominator in their perspectives since the world has become so much more chaotic this year?
Yes, I have. Actually, I probably shouldn't name names because it'd be unfair. They're not here to either comment or defend themselves. Right. But I just did an interview with somebody who has a very large presence in radio. And I noticed that a lot of the things that he was saying were like, yes, we have to do this and that and the other thing. And it was like very woke. And I'm saying that not in any sort of disparaging way, but in a way that I really noticed it. So a year ago, they would have not mentioned that at all, or maybe they would have mentioned it, but it would have been given kind of short shrift. 6 months ago, it would not have at all been like, well, this is the conversation nationally, but I don't want to discount these people, but also we need to make sure these people don't get mad, so I'm going to qualify it with this, and then I also have to qualify it with that because there's this other thing you got to be thinking of right now. And I remember it just being so conspicuous. This is earlier today, so I don't have to try too hard to remember it. But it was so conspicuously like, hey, I don't want to make this group of people mad or this group of people mad, but also I don't want to make this group of people mad. And also here's kind of like, and I'm not saying this in a disparaging way, I want to make that clear, but like a lot of virtue signaling. I know that's a term thrown around, especially by people on the right, that is pejorative. Virtue signaling is not in itself bad, in my opinion. I mean, it shows you and shows others what groups you're in.
Will you define it from your perspective? How do you think about it?
Yeah, virtue signaling. God, you know what? Can I look this up? Because there's going to be a better definition than what I'm going to say here, and I'll translate it through what I mean here.
It's essentially those terms that I'm pretty sure I get it, but I don't use it because I'm scared of screwing up the way that I say it, which may be a metaphor for how you're talking about how people are talking about everything.
Yes, that is exactly my point. So I appreciate you saying that. So virtue signaling, according to Google, the action or a dictionary, the action or practice of publicly expressing opinions or sentiments intended to demonstrate one's good character or the moral correctness of one's position on a particular issue. And that's a good definition, because the way that this is used pejoratively is you'll say something like, yeah, I have an electric car and I really love it. And people go, oh, that's a virtue signal, you snobby left bastard, or whatever it is, you know, tree hugger, you virtue signaler. But like, that doesn't really matter. It's okay to signal what group you're in. Yes, I am signaling that I care about the environment. If you have a problem with that, fine, you're kind of an a-hole and I don't care. But there's a lot of virtue signaling that is more conspicuous. And again, not that there's anything wrong with it. It's just so much more obvious now. We don't say, yeah, America has a lot of entrepreneurs and, you know, there are fewer entrepreneurs now than there used to be. And I'm glad to see that there's a lot more people starting businesses. Now you don't say that. You say, yeah, there's a lot more people starting businesses. And it's important to note that a lot of America was built on the backs of people that were brought here without their consent. And that is true. But it's just kind of almost like a non sequitur thing to throw in an interview that's just about business. But that's the type of virtue signaling that I'm seeing now. And again, it doesn't bother me, but it is something that is totally new as of the last 6 to 12 months that is happening in the conversation. And it's changing a lot of the ways that I can even ask questions on the show. I'll ask a question and sometimes people will say, yeah, I don't know. And they'll kind of do this sort of involuntary cringe because the answer is something that is going to maybe put them in the crosshairs of something they don't like. You try and interview somebody who's at the New York Times, like I did recently, and you'll get a private email back that's like, hey, you have to ask this person because I need permission to do interviews now. And also they're going to say no, but just know that it's not me. They just don't want me to do other media because insert all these reasons about why the journalists who work at big newspapers aren't even allowed to say what they actually feel because they have to be kind of part of what looks to be like the woke Olympics. And it's just kind of an unhealthy addition to the conversation, a detraction from the conversation.
So let me ask you, in your communication with people, are you finding that it's impacting the way you make decisions about how you communicate? Are you catching
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but in a way that I really don't like. Look, I know that a lot of people go, well, if you're going to say something racist, you should be uncomfortable. And I totally agree with that, by the way.
Right.
But a lot of times the line gets moved so much that people say things that are completely taken out of context and it becomes unfair. And then people in positions like you or I, we see that and we go, oh my gosh, you can get canceled for something that you literally did not even do because somebody stitches together 5 minutes, 5 non-consecutive minutes of 5 different conversations and makes it sound like you're saying something that you're not. And that's bad. That's as bad as creating a deep fake with someone's face on it, right. Or it's just not accurate. And it's unfair because it's turned into look, I'm a freedom of speech guy, but not one of those who sits around and talks about the Constitution. I'm a freedom of speech guy in that journalists should be able to write about things and talk about things as long as they're being intellectually honest. And you can nowadays have your intellectual honesty totally negated by somebody who's not interested in intellectual honesty, but is I'm going to do X, Y, Z and get my agenda handled by any means necessary. And that's exactly what the framers were kind of talking about when they said that we can't be doing that crap, right? That when we have why we have the fifth estate with journalism is because we do need a check on that. So in a way, people who try and take down journalists and people who do podcasts, because I don't think those necessarily have 100% overlap, and other media figures, they're really chipping away at one of the few institutions that's there to protect us against things like fascism and authoritarianism. And they're doing it to be haha, I got this person canceled who I disagree with. But each one of those chips is chipping away at the base of the foundation of our ability to talk about things that we don't like. And it becomes a real problem because you think when you do that you're chipping away at the people that are against you, but you're chipping away at our ability to actually speak out against things we don't like in the country and in the world. And that's bad because if you take out 3 table legs, you're in trouble. Even if the 3 other table legs had different opinions than you, you're screwed. That's not going to be a very useful piece of furniture. And that's exactly what's happening to journalism, and it happens in podcasting. And yes, the answer to your question is I do think about things that I say. I'll run things by my team now, and they'll go, oh, but what if somebody does this and then does this and then does this and then does this and then does this? You're going to look bad. And I have to go, are you kidding me? That's what I have to think about now. I have to play chess with somebody taking a tweet that's a response to another tweet. What if they delete that tweet and then they retweet your tweet, but then they put it as a response to someone else's tweet? It's going to sound racist. Are you kidding? Like that is unhealthy. We should not have to think about things like that.
We're all getting a little neurotic, it seems. So
yeah,
my question to you is,
I was already neurotic, but fine.
Yeah, no, I feel you. But no, like it's now almost required. We are all overthinking kind of everything and trying to do well, but then also trying to be protective of what people are going to think our intentions are instead of just worrying about our intentions, right? And that's
exactly
where I think things get a little messed up. How did we get here?
Well, there's a couple answers to that I have ready-made, and there's others that I'm not going to think of.
Okay.
But one of the ways that we got here is that it became very profitable to become a kook online and on the radio. So you see like the Rush Limbaugh types who just say COVID is the common cold. He knows that that's not true, doesn't care, speaks to an audience. You have the Alex Jones type people as well who just, I mean, it's like professional wrestling, except instead of going, hey kid, it's fake. I didn't really jump on his stomach. See, he's okay. We're acting. It's professional wrestling, except for they go, no, it's totally real. And anyone who tells you otherwise is lying to you, including your parents and real journalists. It's like, whoa, no, you don't do that, and we don't tolerate that kind of thing in any other format, except now you have people abusing those rights and privileges. So you have that sort of like performance element becoming really profitable. You also have interference in media from places like the Soviet Union and now Russia, which has been going on for decades. It is not new. Election interference is not new. Russia and the United States have been doing it since before you and I were born, probably even when our parents were the age we are now, or younger. And we have it now happening on social media. So we have media being hijacked by people with other agendas, which actually is probably the other side of that same coin, where those people who are hijacking media for their own agenda, except now the agenda isn't just profit. The agenda is political change. The agenda is getting a certain message across for power and not just money. And I think the other reason that this has happened is just pure irresponsibility. Due to irresponsibility, yes, and also probably a massive hole in our education system. I mean, I did a video about this garbage fake documentary called Plandemic. Have you heard of this thing? This
No.
stupid. So there's this fake documentary. It's just a garbage anti-vax piece of crap called Plandemic, and it has this disgraced fake scientist on there and like this other knucklehead who's an activist, and people believe that the stuff that's in there, and then I'll do a video or I'll do a podcast and I'll be like, look, here's all these scientific journals. This is why this is wrong. And people will respond with like, oh yeah, that's big pharma. You're being a shill. Or they're like, you can't trust those things. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, my science teacher would roll over. Oh, he's still alive, but he would roll over on his desk in his bed. He'd roll over in his bed, sleeping in late on a Friday, working from home, because he doesn't, this was stuff that we were taught a long time ago, but I went to a decent school, a public school, and then I took science classes in college, and they were like, you can't just say things without backing them up, and the sources have to be good. And I realize now there's just huge numbers of people who never understood that, were never taught that, were never having that reinforced. And now you have these people who online through these microphones of social media and otherwise have their opinions reinforced by other people with bigger microphones that are being irresponsible or profit motivated. And they're just not sure what's true. But instead of not being sure and saying, I'm going to take in all the information, they're being taught that anybody with a different opinion has it out for them and is doing it on purpose because they have an agenda of their own. And it's like, kind of the ultimate form of crazy. That's all being amplified online by active measures from Russia, from other countries, and by stupidity. I'm on the fence as to whether it's like 60% active measures and fake news and false information and misinformation and disinformation, or if it's like 90% stupidity and the active measures stuff just kind of like flicked the glass and it fell over. You know, I don't know.
Yes. So how much of it do you think is the fact that, you know, 1 million plus podcasts, right? And we're just getting started, right? Facebook, Twitter, everybody now, like you mentioned Rush Limbaugh, but now everybody's Rush Limbaugh in their own way, right? Yeah. How much of it is that the floodgates got opened and anybody, the public square now invades your life, your living room? Like, you have to hear from the village idiot who gets to have a voice almost anywhere that you go when you're just trying to check your phone.
Yeah, that is causing some of it for sure. But I also don't hear from village idiots and go, maybe there's some truth to that. I see village idiots and I go, well, my background in education, my critical thinking background says that this is garbage and can be discarded, right? But a lot of people don't have that. And there are many countries around the world that have better education systems, and they have just as much internet as we do, but they don't have as many people that have their head firmly planted in their rectum because they were educated better. And when they see somebody say, hey, vaccines are going to have microchips in them so that Bill Gates can depopulate the world, and they're saying it on the phone that they keep in their pocket that actually has chips in it, you kind of go, wow, this person has literally not thought for 5 seconds about the claims that they're making. And that's an education system fault. You know, you don't see as many of these people in Europe, for example, where they have better education, and you see a lot more of them in Africa where they have worse education. You just do.
Is it really correlated with education, though? Because I see a lot of people throwing bombs back and forth who are highly educated on social media. I follow really smart people on both sides of the aisle on Twitter, and they're saying really aggressive statements, negative statements, trashing people left and right, just increasing the hostility and polarization. And I don't see a correlation with education. I mean, let me float something by you to see if you agree. You know, I have a theory that the reason why like Disney kids melt down when they become adults is because like they got famous too fast. They got money too fast. They got too much before they could really mature into learning to handle it. It's like people that win the lottery and then they blow all their money in a year, right? Yeah. You didn't graduate in, so you didn't really have a way to deal with it in a healthy way. You never learned to process it. And the world is kind of like, we've been the recipients of all this information. We just like floodgates open. Now we have access to anything, can say anything, do anything, and somebody will say you're right and somebody will say you're an idiot no matter what you say. And it's hard for people to tell the difference. So they just fall into these like tribes that is just at war with all the other tribes. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's true. There are a lot of educated people online spouting BS, and that's why you might question, is it correlated with education? And I'm not necessarily going to say it absolutely does or doesn't, but I will say that a lot of the people that you see spouting BS online, they're doing it regardless of whether they believe it or not. They're doing it because it helps them gain money and power. Like, I guarantee you that a lot of the pundits on both sides, left and right, they don't believe and they don't care at all whether or not what they're saying is unequivocally true. They just know that their base is going to like it, and it's going to result in them getting more internet points, aka likes, shares, whatever. They don't care. Like I said, I guarantee you, and this is just me personally, I guarantee you that when Rush Limbaugh said coronavirus is the common cold, he wasn't like, I believe this. He was just like, I'm going to say this because I've read it on internet forums, and this is what people who are in denial want to hear, and I'm in a position to confirm their pre-existing bias, and it's going to make them like me, and that's how I get advertisers and keep them. So I'm just going to say that. I guarantee you he just doesn't care. He doesn't care.
And when you use Russian as an example, I mean, he's the most identifiable with conservatism on radio, right?
Right.
Do you feel that the left has an equal part in this?
Yes.
Do you feel like it really is? Because you mentioned the farthest on the right and then like the off the grid right with Alex Jones, but like what do you think the left's contribution is?
Yeah, the reason I want to be clear here, the reason I didn't give a lefty kind of Rush Limbaugh example is solely because I can't think of one right now. But I'm sure if you named a few, I'd be like, oh, right, that. I just can't think of any right now off the top of my head. The Rush Limbaugh thing happens to be top of mind because I just saw somebody play that clip because it aged like milk, as you would expect. Now that we knew then it wasn't the common cold, but now it's like obviously not. There is equal fault on both sides for sure. Well, you know what? I'm not entirely sure. Can I apportion more fault on the right than the left? I'm not really sure. To me, it looks like there's more on the right, but that doesn't mean that there is. It just means that my cognitive bias is weighing that more heavily, and or I've seen more of it in the media that I consume being mocked. But it wouldn't. I'm going to go ahead and say it's probably equal on both sides, and the reason for that is because both sides have the exact same incentive structures. Right. If I'm on the left or the right, I stand to gain money and power by saying stupid crap as loudly as possible and getting a tribe and then selling them mattresses, right? Or whatever advertiser that I have. In fact, I think if you're on the left and you are more vitriolic, you probably have an easier time getting advertisers than you do if you do the same thing on the right. Because just looking at podcasting and networks and stuff, and again, I won't name any shows or networks.
You don't have to, but I know exactly what you're saying because I'm working with both sides, right?
Yeah.
Placing ads on both sides. And I think what you're saying is definitely true. It doesn't mean I think one side is right and one side's wrong. I think both sides are wrong, to be honest.
Yes.
But no.
One side can sell mattresses while being wrong and the other side can't. That's
correct.
The thing.
Exactly. Right. So you're like a legit journalist. You're not like me and the other 999,000 people that do this. Like you participate in it. I know you've been a leader of a group in San Francisco. I don't remember what it was officially, but like, how is this new wave in culture impacting journalists, and how are they reacting to that?
I'm less tuned into the journalism thing as I probably should be, but I do see, and they call it the fifth estate, which is a cool, pretentious way of talking about journalism, and I really enjoy it.
It's great branding.
It is. Yeah. It's great branding. Yeah. The problem that we're seeing is, and I'll just give one example that crossed my desk this morning, aka my kitchen table, because that's where desks are now.
Right.
The New York Times, I wish I could remember the name. I'm sure you saw this. They ran some op-ed a while back. A lot of people got everything up in a twist about it, and then they fired the op-ed editor that let it happen, and now everyone at the New York Times is so shriveled up and clenched up that they can't say or do anything. I brought that example up earlier in the show, and I'm just shocked by that, because you'd think, who is not... These organizations are fighting inside amongst themselves about this stuff. Right. Of course it's going to have a chilling effect. You don't even need to have the government or the population create that chilling effect. You just have it by self-censoring and again, trying to be like either the most woke or the most controversial or whatever it is that any sort of outlet is trying to do. So we have to really be careful as journalists not to eat ourselves alive, because as soon as we start doing that, which of course that process has already started, then you have a lot of folks that are more than willing to take advantage of that. Like if the New York Times is going to self-censor, you know who's not going to do that? Rush Limbaugh, Alex Jones, like the same sort of classic examples. And I don't want to keep labeling or bringing up specific types of examples because I think it's unfair. Sure. And also they're not here to defend themselves. So it is kind of crappy. I don't think people like Alex Jones care or Rush Limbaugh cares. But you find that as soon as you start self-censoring, you find that the other side is going to be fully able and willing to take advantage of that. It doesn't mean you should use the same tactics as them, but it means that you have to be really careful, because if you start to tear down everybody that sort of disagrees with you by 5 degrees, it's that same problem that we have when everybody... It's like, oh, that's cultural appropriation, therefore you're racist, therefore you're a Nazi. It's like, right. Wow, what words are you going to use for people who are actually racists?
Right.
What are you going to do? You've exhausted the vocabulary.
Yeah.
You have to be very careful about that. So when somebody says something that is off color or off putting, you got to resist labeling them in a certain way or something that you disagree with. You have to really resist that. And it's tempting because, again, the people that are motivated by profit or a political agenda, they're going to immediately jump to that because they have to discredit you because they're playing a zero-sum game. Every listener or viewer that you have that they don't is dollars out of their pocket or power out of their ballot box. If we're doing that to ourselves, we're totally screwed because we're going to end up not wanting to do anything because of this zero-sum game, which means we just have no chips to play with at that point.
Jordan, you said something earlier that I want to go back to, which is you're talking about the incentive structure to be polarizing, right? The more extreme you are, nobody wants to hear from the middle. You have, for example, movie just came out, Stars and Strife. I'm going to keep talking about it. It's about how polarized our country is. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody's paying attention.
I never even heard of it.
Of course. And it's got, I mean, they've got people from both sides. You got Rahm Emanuel. You have a leader from Black Lives Matter. You have, former secretaries. You have James Baker. I mean, like, big people. And they're from both sides talking about, like, kind of, can't we all just get along kind of a thing. Nobody wants to hear that. So how have you seen, heard, thought of anything, any effort in the world that attempts to put this back in the box and bring some discipline to the reward cycle so that you're not monetarily incentivized to be a flamethrower?
Yeah, that's the trick, right? Like on the Jordan Harbinger show, what I've done people will go, you have to endorse a presidential candidate. You have to talk about this. You have to talk about that. You have to interview this person and not that person.
Right.
What I've done is sort of take a step back and gone, all right, what kind of episodes can I have on the Jordan Harbinger show that are going to make people think better, process ideas, process argument better, be able to defend themselves against disinformation or misinformation, parse information, be better critical thinkers, be more informed. Because if I start saying, you know what, you should agree with me, here are these points that are sort of on the right or sort of on the left, people are on the other side are going to go, nah, and they're going to tune out, they're going to switch the channel, whatever it is. My job now, I view it as I have to persuade, but I have to persuade people to think better because rational, logical conclusions, they end up being in the middle more so than on any extreme, because extremes are by definition black and white thinking most of the time. I'm trying to think of an exception and I can't, which is also kind of black and white thinking now that I think about it, but they're mostly black and white thinking, right? So if you say, oh, well, illegal immigration is always bad, or immigrants are bad, or people of a certain skin color are bad, that's obviously, no pun intended, black and white thinking, and it doesn't make any sense. When you start teaching people how to think, we go back to the problem I mentioned earlier about education, and when it's like, oh, the reason we don't have this is because big pharma and science have all colluded with big academia and all of the media to tell you that vaccines are good when really they're bad. And here's why. Here's two people that are insane talking about it. And here's another person that has a felony and can't work anymore, selling a book now about why it's bad. You have to say, I can't say, don't trust her. She's a disgraced scientist who's trying to grift money because she can't work anywhere because she's a thief. But if you say that, they dig in. But if I go, let me teach you how to evaluate sources of information. Mm-hmm. Then they go, oh, that's a good idea. That's good. I'm going to use that to a lot of things. And I go, cool, evaluate the source of this thing you just showed me. And they go, okay, well, if I back out this way and I do this and I go through that pipeline that Jordan's guest just talked about on the Jordan Harbinger show, maybe this pandemic movie also has an agenda, and maybe that agenda is financial and or political. And you're right. That's a bunch of crap, and I can't believe I believed it. And I do that with multi-level marketing schemes. I do it with pyramid schemes. I do it with anti-vax nonsense. I do it with a lot of things like that. And I do specific takedowns of those topics. But the rest of the episodes of the show are just about thinking better, and then mixed in with stories that people are entertained by and educated by. But at the end of the day, you come away and you go, okay, now when information comes in, it has to go through a filter that makes sense of what it is, and then it goes into your brain. You don't just get programmed by whatever crap you're hearing on YouTube anymore. You actually get to think about stuff in a critical way, and that's what people need to do. That's what happens when people land in the middle, or I should say when that happens, people land more in the middle because they can see the merits to both sides of an argument. talk to anybody on the extreme left or the extreme right, they don't even have a clue what the other side actually wants or thinks. They have no freaking idea. They've never given it any modicum of thought. They're just angry about something and they picked a random side. And that's why often enough, you see a lot of these people who are extreme left or extreme right, and they will suddenly flip to the other side because it's convenient. And you go, how did you travel all the way across the spectrum? The answer is they totally didn't. They just picked one extreme view and then they picked another one. They never made the journey across the middle of the spectrum. It has nothing to do with thinking about things in a different way. It's just about picking a team.
So I've heard about studies that look at both sides of the spectrum, and the most extreme people on the right and the most extreme people on the left actually start using the same language.
Totally.
They get, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's always us versus them, right? It always comes down to that. This is really good. Go ahead.
You know how many people in 2016 told me they wanted to overthrow the United States government? And I mean like peacefully. Everybody on the extreme right, Donald Trump is the only way we're going to peacefully overthrow the United States government. Extreme left, we have to do this and take this down. This is the only way we're going to overthrow the United States government as it currently exists. And I'm thinking, if y'all were in the same room together, you wouldn't even know for the first hour that you guys were about to throw Molotov cocktails at each other's businesses, restaurants, and bikes or whatever it is. You'd be slapping each other on the back, drinking beer, and only until you finally figured out that one of you was going to vote one way and one of you was going to vote the other. Only until that point, only at that point, I should say, would you have figured out that you guys don't agree on that at all. It's the exact same thing. It's like, it shocks me how much those people actually have in common, which kind of makes it take the spectrum of like left and right, which is this line. And it actually, if you bend it around into a circle, you find the extremes right next to each other. And they think they're all the way over here, but they're really just sitting next to each other. And there's a partition that they can't seem to see.
Yep. 100% agree. So let's pivot a little bit. Let's talk business.
Sure thing.
So did you pay attention to Business Roundtable and the shift from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism? You've been paying any attention to that? That's
the thing in the email that you sent me before the show where I was like, you're going to have to explain this when we jump on.
Yeah, no worries. So I'll restate, but it's like 181 of the top companies in the U.S. Basically, the CEOs all signed this, this document going like, hey, we've been operating under the assumption that it was the primacy of shareholder value. It's everything you do is in service of shareholder value, right? And they basically came out a year ago and said, no, it is stakeholder value, which means that our business, we care about shareholders, but we care about employees, we care about vendors, we care about the community at large. And I think what you've seen, I don't know if it's, there's a bit of a chicken or egg issue there, which is like, what came first? Were they reacting to the movement in society, or has that actually propelled society forward? Who knows? But clearly, brands, corporations are talking about things that we never looked to corporations to talk about before. And I'm not sure that we, used to invite them to these conversations. And now it's like, if you don't, there's something wrong with you. I mean, I can't tell you this year how many companies that we work with that were pressured either internally or externally to make certain statements on social media. And then they go, all right, well, we better say that on social media. And then they do. And then you have one side hitting them with a hammer going, you didn't say enough. You said that wrong. And the other side says, why would you say that at all? You're totally missing it, right? So it's like, so I think there's a lot of pressure right now on leaders at companies and companies themselves to be more political, to make statements that are polarizing, which is a real challenge, because unless you're the type of company that serves only one side of the country, you're going to be wading into waters that are outside of your expertise, right? And so I don't know if you've been experiencing that in on your side, but
sure.
I want to know what you think about it, where you see it, and what about that is healthy and what's not.
So
Let me just ask you 4 questions.
Yeah, it becomes I mean, I see it all the time, of course. I'm no stranger to that. I had it happen in my own business where people were saying, hey, you need to do this, and you need to say something about that, and you need to say something about this. And then as soon as I dipped my toe, and I was afraid this would happen, as soon as I dipped my toes into those waters, it was the same thing. You didn't say enough. You know, this is lip service, etc. And I was like, this is why I wasn't going to get in here. You know, I was going to do other things that were actually, there were actions that were better instead of just these, like posting the black box or the empty box on that one day that you had to post on Instagram or whatever it was. And it's just like, this is called slacktivism, where you're just not doing anything, but you're kind of paying lip service to it. And I understand why companies want to do it. And I think it's appropriate in certain instances, but you do have to realize that you're going to isolate some people, and you either have to decide that that's okay, or you have to decide that you don't want to get into it. You can't really take half measures. And look, if you're isolating people and the people that you're isolating are making feel isolated or making feel alienated, are saying things that are racist or prejudiced or something like that, your company should at some level be okay with that. You can form a tribe around a belief, and it can't, like Nike can say, hey, we don't like racism. And if people go, oh yeah, well, I'm going to burn this pair of Nikes, it's bad for the environment, but go ahead and do it. Burn those shoes. No one cares, because you know, the belief that Nike's saying, hey, you know, we shouldn't be murdering people in the streets with reckless abandon. If that is offensive to you and you think they should stay in their lane, I would love to hear what you think when Nike does something that you agree with. Because what I found is that a lot of these people who complain about companies doing this, they never complain when it's something that they agree with. They only complain when it's something that they disagree with. And that's obvious, right? It's so convenient. People think like, oh, well, companies should mind their own business and just make my stock value go up. And then it's like, oh, wait, why didn't you say something about this cause that I care about? You know, where's your patriotism? So you have to be aware as a company that you're going to run afoul of that. And I think you literally have to just realize that the people that you are alienating, often it just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. You're going to take a small hit from them, but you're going to receive more business and loyalty from people that realize you're doing the right thing, whatever that right thing might be for you. In a world like, I do feel for these executives that have to make these choices, because it's a risk every time. But marketing has always been about trying to make a tribe. Well, not always. Recently has been about trying to make a tribe out of something. And you can't really go and make a tribe that's all about, hey, we're making sport clothes and we're making stuff for athletes, and look at all these cool female athletes that we have clothes for now, when, you know, we used to only make stuff mostly for guys, and we have female athletes making shoes. We have people of color on our advertising now instead of just a bunch of white dudes in track shorts. You can't then stop and go, oh, we don't want to dive into this other thing. You've already made a choice. You already have made a tribe out of your users. Why are you now going to stop trying to speak the language of that tribe? Because you're afraid you're going to lose sales? Like, I understand it, but I just think it's garbage. If you're going to pick a side and that's how you're marketing your stuff, then lean into it, right? You're not really taking a risk. You're taking a risk not doing it right. I get that, but you're taking a risk not doing it at all. That's for sure.
Yeah. And, you know, I think where this gets really complex is that we all want these things to be black and white. And as you know, the world's not doing nuance very well, at least not in this country. Right. And so one of my concerns is like, well, where were you yesterday? And like, as a business owner, I think about, okay, I want to walk very slowly towards the public stands that I take. I don't want to react to something that just happened too aggressively, because that feels like easy come, easy go, right? And, you know, and I think everybody, I hope that people will be thoughtful and going like, all right, let's figure out where we can really make an impact that is in concert with the values of our business and focus on that. But I think so much of what I see going on is very reactionary. And like you said, it's like the woke Olympics a lot of times. And I don't know if that sticks. I question the authenticity of that sometimes when it's just Johnny come lately to these issues. Like I'd just rather see more measured approaches and make sure that, you know, and I don't want to reduce this just to race, because this is not just a Black Lives Matter issue. there you've got the manufacturer standing up endorsing Trump, and then it was beans, right? We're
Yeah.
it's like it could be anything, right? But it's like, is that really what you need to know from the people that you buy things to stock your cabinets with? Like, how important is that, and when is that appropriate? And is it a free for all? It just feels like we're all being so extreme right now, and I think that I don't know that this ends in a good place, and I'm starting.
No, I
to
agree.
think that all the polarity doesn't. So listen, in a minute we're going to play the unsolicited advice game.
Okay.
But before that, I need to ask our audience for some help on something that we do take a stand about, although it's not very controversial. And it's the issue of isolation, which I think many of us have been dealing with since COVID. But somewhere that this has been happening for a long time and will continue to happen when we're no longer talking about it every day is in children's hospitals across America. You have children that are in bed alone with nobody to support them because most parents cannot be there to help them around the clock and to care for these kids. World-class medical staffs don't do the job because they have to attend to the medical needs of children. But you have young children that are alone with no one to comfort them. And we know how important being held is when children are young. And as you know, Jordan, as a father, we experienced this when our youngest daughter was born. She was in Children's Hospital for 6 months, and it was heartbreaking to look around and see single parents, working parents, people that just couldn't be there, and there's nobody to comfort the kid. So what we found out was there are a lot of people that want to volunteer and want to help to go and comfort the children who are alone in hospitals, but there's usually no funding to staff them, train them, manage them, deal with the scheduling. And so at my wife's initiative, we've started something called the Koala Corps, which sets out to solve that problem by hiring people to run those programs inside a children's hospital, starting with Children's Hospital Los Angeles. And so you can learn about this if you go to Koala Corps, KOALACORPS.com. And give what you can because it's a very important issue, and we're getting very, very close to hitting our goal and getting full-time staff managing this here in LA, and we'd like to go further than that. So koalacorps.com. And if you like what we're doing here, please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your shows. Also visit oxfordroad.com, subscribe to our newsletter, The Influencer, which gives you weekly industry updates and thought leadership. Okay, now let's get back to our conversation with Jordan. This is where we're going to play the unsolicited advice game. And what we've done is we're going to give you 20 seconds to give a tweet-sized piece of advice to 7 different individuals or groups within this country. And the only rule is that your advice helps bring us closer together as people and find common ground so that we can start to work against so much of the polarity that we're experiencing. Okay, so are you ready for this?
No.
Ha! Should we do it anyway?
Sure. I don't have a choice, I'm pretty sure. So
right,
no, let's do it.
Yeah, you could tap out. You can tap out anytime, but
okay.
But we're not going to cut it out if you tap it out. So you're going to have to do that publicly.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Okay, here we go. First one, Donald Trump. Ready, set,
Good
go.
Lord.
Yeah.
Being persuasive doesn't make you right. Is that advice? No. Being persuasive doesn't make you right. You stand a better chance at winning if you can at least win some of us over to your side, not just by tearing the other side down. He's not going to listen to my advice, right? This is just an exercise in futility.
I don't know.
on Twitter.
I hear that the president listens to this podcast quite often, so I wouldn't be surprised. We run in some good circles. Okay, so Joe Biden.
Don't play the same game as Trump. It's really tempting, but it's not going to end the way you think it's going to end.
Love it. Okay, now you're getting efficient. All right, let's talk to the media broadly.
Play the long game. Your short-term profit motive is hurting your long-term profit.
So succinct. And by the way, Jordan, I just want to tell you, I wanted to compliment you on that earlier because that's exactly what you're doing with your show. You're not you're not taking the low-hanging fruit. You're doing the hard work that's actually going to help people.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no,
Thank you.
You're taking your own advice. I love it. Okay, next one is marketers.
Oh gosh. Every time you erode a bit of my trust, or every time my trust erodes in you, I'm less likely to buy from you in the future.
Very good.
I think that's probably it. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, Republicans.
Ooh. Remember back when you cared about everyone else except for yourself? Or remember back when you cared about other people except for yourself? This is not going to go over well. Let me try that again. Let's see. Your party wants to value America and put America first. Ask yourself if you're really doing that or if you're doing something else that looks like that under the guise, under the justification that it'll all work out later.
Wonderful. Okay, Democrats.
Your platform should not entirely be to rip Republicans down. You need to stand for something other than the destruction of the other side. And that goes for Republicans too, frankly. I think I could have given the same advice to both sides.
Well, like you talked about, the line meets in the middle, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, America.
Educate yourself. Don't believe everything you hear, but also don't believe people that say not to believe everything you hear. Always do your homework.
All right, and I got a bonus question for you, which is if you could write in anybody alive today in this country and they'd be the next president, who would it be?
Mike Rowe. Do you know who that is? From Dirty Jobs?
I know the name. Okay.
So the guy from Dirty Job, the host of Dirty Jobs. So his whole thing is, hey, college is kind of expensive and most of you probably don't really need it. And also a lot of you should just go to trade schools because we don't have enough skilled laborers and those jobs actually exist. And he seems extremely honest. I know him personally, so I think he is. He genuinely wants to help people. He's generous. He's charismatic. He's funny. I think everybody would love him. So I would do that. I don't know if he's up for it, but it's okay. I'm writing him in.
So I was saying we should all just write in Denzel and be done with it.
Oh, not bad.
I think we can all agree. And then I saw this list come out on Axios that said, what celebrities do Americans wish that could be the president? And Denzel was number 2. Tom Hanks is number 3. Number 1, guess who?
Who?
Morgan Freeman.
Oh, I can see that. I can see that. Yeah.
He usually takes more of the deity gigs.
He does.
I guess he's president sometimes.
Big pot smoker, though. We'd have to get over that.
Yeah. He might have a little more baggage, but I think we could agree on Denzel.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about cancel culture earlier. Do you think that it is a good thing, a bad thing, somewhere in the middle? Like, how do you? No,
it's a bad. It's unequivocally a bad thing. You can still punish people without having cancel culture be the prevailing culture of the day. You can still punish people. Like Louis C.K., for example, definitely should have taken some heat for what he did. Definitely should have been punished for what he did. Did we have to take down and ruin the career of that person? I don't think so. And I think it's counterproductive because now all you're doing is causing people to not admit things that might have been bad in the past, to lie about things that might have happened in the past, because the consequences are disproportionate. So now you're making it so that nobody can actually have there's a reason that in places like South Africa and Rwanda, they have these like truth tribunals where people just go and talk about what happened, and it's not under the guise of ruining or punishing. It's to just get everything out in the open so the country can move forward and heal. And we need to do that with a lot of these things. Like we see people taking photographs or saying things that are negative, you can still punish that person. But if everyone knows that their life is going to get ruined the second that a comment gets taken out of context, you're just going to end up with deception. You're going to end up with a lot more people being dishonest in what they do and say and not saying what they really mean. So cancel culture, all it is making sure that the best liars and the best deceivers are the ones that survive at the end of the day and everybody else gets canceled. That's all that means.
Do you pay any attention to the third-party groups that will actually follow media channels and media figures simply to spin out quotes and then pressure advertisers to drop sponsorship of the programming? Have you seen any of
No,
that?
that's insane.
Well,
I'm sure
you
that
ever heard of
exists.
Sleeping Giants, Media Matters? I mean, there are some pretty,
I mean, I've heard of it, but I don't follow
yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah, okay. Um, So let's do this because you've given us a lot of time. Let's go back to media for a little bit. You're clearly a pretty balanced guy. Tell us about your media consumption diet. What do you feed yourself?
Yeah, I'm pretty. It's a little ridiculous because I consume a lot of stuff that is patently not balanced, but then I fact check it. I think that's the step that most people don't take. Like I'll read an article that's on the extreme left or the extreme right, not like the ridiculous. Like I'm not watching Alex Jones yell and spit into a microphone, but I will read an article and I'll go, huh, okay, interesting. How would I argue against that? Because I have a law background. I was an attorney.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, I want to hear the other side's argument. Great. Let me take that and disassemble it. And so I'll post something or look for that article in the news, and then I'll look at Reddit because Reddit will have like every perspective, and the good ones that are well thought and well articulated will bubble to the top, depending on what subreddit you're in, of course. And so if you read a piece of news and then you look at a subreddit that's a little bit more left and a little bit more right, and then another one that's like rational skepticism, you'll see a lot of different arguments about that. And then you can parse those news sources. And as you do that over and over, you start to get a really good feel for how people are arguing, what people are writing. You start to find writers that are a little bit more balanced. And, kind of spoiler alert, they're not writing for an extreme left or an extreme right site. They're because nobody who says this is accurate and this other thing is not accurate, but then this party is right about this, but they're not right about that. Those people don't get to write for the kind of prevailing team blue or team red journals. They don't get to, because those sides just want their biases and beliefs confirmed. They don't actually want the truth on either side.
Well, so do you have media brands that like you wake up every day and you read, these publications, or do you even watch cable news? Like,
no.
What do you listen to? What do you read on a regular basis?
Yeah, I typically read books because since they're playing the long game, there's no, with the exception of like the latest book by so-and-so trying to like spill on the president or spill on the last president or spill on this and that and the other thing, with the exception of those books, they're not playing the short game. They're playing the long game. They have to have relevant information 4 years, 5 years from now if they want to sell more of these things. So they're not obsessed. And also the publication cycle is so long, they can't take something from last week and spin it into a ridiculous hot mess and then put it out on a page. They got 18 months before whatever they write, or 10 months even shows up. So books are typically more well-reasoned, and they have a little bit more of a shelf life, literally, than a lot of the other crap that's out there. So you read books, you learn how to think. You read blogs, you get told what to think that morning, and then your opinion changes the next day. And so I'm very careful about that. Podcasts also by great creators. I occasionally watch PBS NewsHour because it's more or less nonpartisan, because their news cycle is not 24 hours. It's real news. They don't need hype to get you to watch it because it's just geeks like me and old people that don't have cable or something that watch PBS. So they just put real news in there. That's it. And I'll watch foreign news sources just because the local news tends to cover things in a little bit more in depth than national news. And also, national news wants to grab the flashiest crap and then blast it everywhere, whereas more local sources, they need to play up their local issues, but they don't have to just make stuff up most of the time, because they're not trying to impress. They're not writing from a cubicle in Manhattan and trying to get the attention of somebody in Arizona. They're just not doing that. They're writing for their own community.
All right. So I think where you and I align, it seems like we align on a lot of this stuff, but it seems like you accept the premise that we have gotten increasingly polarized and it's venomous and destructive, right? I guess a question I have for you is like, where does this go? What is in jeopardy if we don't start walking back some of the extreme negative thinking that we have.
Yeah, we're going to erode our only check on power, our only real check on power, which is journalism and media. And you're going to end up with people that are so tribalized that they literally, and that's why this sort of narrative, like mainstream media is this, that, and the other thing, like media contributes to that negativity, and that's bad. And then also you get people who go, the only media source I can trust is, and then they list some blog that has like a single writer or two writers in a basement somewhere in Macedonia writing for United States people in certain parts of the United States that really want some kind of, I don't know, they want to have to rocket launchers, as a part of their Second Amendment rights or something like that. You end up with people that just only get their information from certain places that already agree with them and then program those people what to believe. And that is exactly what the Soviet Union, Russia, and other countries that have active measures are trying to do. They're trying to tribalize us so that we can't function. It's working. It's really, really sad.
Yeah, well, and I was telling you about Stars and Strife earlier. One of the points it starts out with is that, like, a nation, an empire usually has about a 250-year run, and then that's about it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, do you think that it just gets increasingly chaotic, but it holds, or do you think we're pressure testing the system, and do you think we're at risk of this whole thing not staying together?
I definitely think we're at risk. I mean, I hate to be a pessimist, and I'm not a pessimist, but I think we are at risk. We're going to end up with an authoritarian leader, or we're going to end up with some kind of upheaval. And it's going to backfire on the whole world because a lot of people are kind of chuckling. Like I see these folks in Europe that are like, oh, America's finally getting their due. And I'm like, guess what? That power vacuum is going to be filled by China. So make sure you got your Mandarin ready and don't think for a second that your email privacy that you are so proud of and all these laws that you made are going to stand up, Mr. Brexit. Like, you're in trouble. A post-America world is not one you really want to live in. So you might want to start rooting for our side and not the other side. Like, we have a lot of flaws here in the United States, but you sure as hell do not want the Chinese Communist Party deciding what you can say on the internet. That will happen if you don't take this seriously. And so that's kind of my message to a lot of our international folks. You hear it, you need only look as far as people in countries like Australia where they're really feeling the pressure from China, and they're like, hey, is anybody else noticing that our real estate market's being taken and there's a lot of pressure on our media and our government? That will increase. That is part of the plan for the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. And they are watching us go up in flames like this. And Russia isn't doing this so that they can put their own new kind of world order in. They're doing it because we're a check on Putin. They don't care about people. There's not some other sort of competing model. This isn't like, oh, we're going to have a communist revolution and everyone's going to unite. It's no, we're going to end up with authoritarian dictatorship and rulers in other countries. And the reason they're trying to confuse us and get us knocked down a couple of pegs is because we threaten their ability to rob their own populations blind and do dastardly things. So you have to pay attention to this. You can't just move to Canada and get away from it. You can't move anywhere and get away from it.
So where does it start? Is it grassroots voters just making different decisions? Is it the education system?
It's education, man. It's education. It's education system, and it's educating yourself. Look, I'm already out of school. Everybody who's listening to this is probably already out of school. You need to figure out how to think and parse information. The smartest people get taken in by misinformation and disinformation. If you don't learn how to protect yourself from that, you're going to end up just believing whatever comes your way or whatever crap that you think of yourself, and that's not a suitable replacement for reality or for critical thinking. It's just not. It's yes, you'll make different decisions as voters, but I'm not here to tell you what to vote for. I'm here to teach you how to think for yourself, and then you will know what you should be choosing because you will be able to think for yourself.
Well, with that, we're going to close. And I just want to say to you, Jordan, you are not only an excellent podcaster and journalist, you are an excellent educator because I feel like you have the ability to take very complex, thorny topics that most of us don't fully understand and deconstruct it in a way that we can understand. And I really appreciate that. And I think a lot of the people listening to this are going to appreciate it too. So I'm really
thank you for the kind words.
Of course.
Yeah, this was fun. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. So this show is dedicated to the notion of e pluribus unum, out of the many one. We believe that we can work through our differences without deepening divides and we value welcoming perspectives that are different from our own. Thank you for joining us as we embark on the long road to national recovery and sustainable discourse. As always, if you found this show helpful, please subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen. Visit oxfordroad.com and subscribe to The Influencer, which is our weekly newsletter. And of course, thank you to Bianca, Kyle, Jennifer, and the team at Wit Strategy for making this happen. We have a republic. Let's try to keep it.